Picture this. You're walking barefoot on the beach on a blazing hot summer afternoon. You step onto the dry sand and boom, you immediately have to sprint because it's absolutely scorching your feet. But then you splash into the ocean water just a few feet away and it's literally freezing cold. So why exactly does that happen? Think about it. It's the exact same sun beating down for the exact same amount of time on two substances that are sitting right next to each other. Yet their temperatures are wildly different. This isn't just some random quirk of nature, you guys. It's a fundamental property of physics, and it actually keeps our entire planet habitable. If you were to run a simple experiment at home, say, taking equal masses of dry sand and water, putting them at the same starting temperature, and sticking them under a heat lamp for 30 minutes, you'd see this exact same phenomenon. The sand's temperature absolutely spikes, while the water barely warms up at all. There's a real mystery here about how different materials handle heat. By the end of this explainer, you're going to understand the precise concept behind this mystery, the core formula that governs it, and exactly how to apply it in real-world calculations. Trust me, you'll never look at a boiling pot of water or even a braking truck the same way again. Section 1. Unlocking the mystery, the heat formula. Okay, to understand why that sand burns and the water freezes, we've got to look at how physicists actually measure and calculate heat transfer. Experiments show us that transferred heat depends on three very specific physical factors. First, the change in temperature. Obviously, if you want to double the temperature change of an object, you intuitively need to add twice the heat. Second is the mass of the system. To heat up 2 cups of water instead of 1, well, you need twice the heat. And third, the actual substance and its phase, meaning, whether it's a solid, a liquid, or a gas. And this brings us to our master key for today. It's the quantitative relationship between heat transfer and temperature change. It's written as Q equals mcΔT. Seriously? If you're taking notes, draw a giant box around this equation. This is your ultimate tool for solving thermal mysteries. Let's break this bad boy down step by step. Q is the symbol for heat transfer, and we measure that in joules. The M is the mass of the substance, usually in kilograms. Then we have that little triangle, the Greek letter delta, combined with T. That represents the change in temperature, which is just your final temperature minus your initial temperature. And finally, we have that lowercase c. That stands for specific heat, and it's a totally unique property of whatever material you happen to be measuring. Now, right about here, a lot of people look at that delta T and ask a very important question. Wait a second, is a change in Celsius the exact same as a change in Kelvin for this formula? Am I going to have to do some complicated conversion here? Well, the answer is a resounding yes. They are exactly the same. A 1-degree change on the Celsius scale is the exact same magnitude as a 1-unit change on the Kelvin scale. So when you're calculating delta T, a difference of 60 degrees Celsius is perfectly identical to a difference of 60 Kelvin. You can totally breathe a sigh of relief on that one. Section 2, specific heat, the C factor. Let's look at how this builds into that mysterious little C from our equation, because this is the true differentiator between our hot beach sand and our freezing ocean water. Notice how visually drastic the differences are here. Specific heat is basically defined as the amount of heat necessary to change the temperature of 1 kilogram of mass by 1 degree Celsius. Look at iron. It has a specific heat of just 452 joules per kilogram degree Celsius. Glass is 840, but look at water. It's just towering over the others. Water has a specific heat of 4,186. That is roughly 5 times that of glass and nearly 10 times that of iron. It takes an absolutely massive amount of heat to raise the temperature of water compared to almost any other common substance. This kind of thermal stubbornness is basically water's superpower, and it's the exact reason why the ocean stays cool while the beach sand just bakes in the sun. Section 3. Real-world math, smoking truck brakes. So, specific heat determines how materials respond to energy. Let's take this out of the theoretical realm and apply our formula to a pretty dramatic real-world example. Imagine a massive 10,000 kilogram truck driving down a steep mountain road, dropping 75 meters in vertical elevation at a constant speed. Now, to keep from speeding out of control, the driver is riding the brakes. Those brakes are doing work, taking all that gravitational potential energy and converting it directly into internal energy, which is heat, inside just 100 kilograms of brake material. Let's run the math using exactly what we just learned. Step 1, we calculate the total energy the truck loses. Mass times gravity times height gives us 7.35 times 10 to the 6 joules. Step 2, since the brakes absorb all this energy, that becomes our Q, our heat transfer. Step 3, we take our master formula, Q equals mcΔT, and solve for the temperature change. We divide that massive amount of energy by the 100 kilogram mass of the brakes and the specific heat of the brake material, which sits at about 800.
And the result? The brakes experience a 92 degrees Celsius temperature increase. That is nearly the boiling point of water, generated just from driving down a single hill. If those brakes were already warm, this descent could easily push them past the boiling point of water, which could potentially cause brake failure. This brilliantly illustrates why modern hybrid cars are designed to capture this braking energy and turn it into battery power instead of useless, dangerous heat.
Section 4, Calorimetry, Thermal Equilibrium.
Let's move to our next core concept, which deals with what happens when hot and cold objects interact. Suppose you're cooking, and you take a half-kilogram aluminum pan right off the stove. It is a scorching 150 degrees Celsius. You immediately pour 1 cup, so about 0.25 kilograms of cold 20-degree tap water directly into it. Assuming the pan is insulated from the counter, these two substances are going to fight it out until they reach thermal equilibrium.
To find their final resting temperature, we just balance the equations. The heat lost by the hot pan must perfectly equal the heat gained by the cold water. We set up Q cold equals negative Q hot. Then we plug in the mass and specific heat of water on one side and the mass and specific heat of aluminum on the other. After doing a little algebra to isolate the final temperature, we find they meet at exactly 59.1 degrees Celsius.
Now wait a second. I want you to stop and think critically about this result. Why is our final temperature of 59.1 degrees so much closer to the cold water starting temp of 20 degrees rather than the pan's scorching 150 degrees? I mean, the pan had twice the mass of the water, and it was incredibly hot.
Well, the math perfectly proves what we discovered back at the beach. Water's immense specific heat of 4,186 utterly overpowers the aluminum specific heat, which is just 900. Water acts like this massive thermal sponge. And this is exactly why lakes stay at a relatively constant temperature day and night, even when the air temperature swings wildly around them.
Section 5, Lecture Summary.
We've covered some fantastic ground today, from the beach to smoking truck brakes. Let's consolidate exactly what you need to remember. Here are your 3 main takeaways. First, heat transfer is governed by an object's mass, its temperature change, and the specific type of substance it is. Second, Q equals mcΔT is your master key for unlocking these thermal equilibrium problems. And third, specific heat is really a measure of thermal stubbornness. The higher the number, like water, the harder it is to heat up or cool down.
But here's a thought to leave you with. We assume today that our substances didn't change form. But what happens to our pristine little formula if we add so much heat to that pan that the water actually starts to boil and turn into steam? Does Q still equal mcΔT? Well, that phase change actually breaks our current rules, and figuring out how to calculate it is exactly what we're going to tackle in our next explain.